Yes, I'm quite well aware of the theories about global warming and the talk about man-made activities causing CO2 gases, which bring about a warming of our oceans and a melting of the polar caps. But there are other theories that abound. I'm actually going to go over one of them. One is volcanic activity that has increased under the ocean floors. Um, it cannot be proven one way or the other. It's not as if there's an underwater camera over every inch of ocean space that we can observe all this activity. But it's one theory. So I just want to point out some things that for food for thought, that there's a little bit more to this global warming, and possibly, I say, there's an agenda to it. So it's a little bit more than what appears to be on the surface, so to say. So they went into they talked about, if you heard about the global warming actually supposedly has a pause lately. Um, Now I'm going to point to the links where I'm referencing these articles, because I'm not going to go over the whole article. I'm just going to tell you that they're stating in the article that the work they wanted, that they said there was a pause in global warming, was actually stopped altogether. They're telling you it's stopped altogether. Um, there's another part in it where it says they're talking about the warmings of the oceans. The warming middle depths were attributed to man-made CO2 gases being pumped into the oceans, while the cooling surface layers were attributed to natural and warm and cold cycles. I pretty much attribute it to just natural cooling and warming that the Earth undergoes over the last, I don't know how many millions of years. But I'm just going to point to a couple other things here, because it's not the majority of scientists that are saying that there's not global warming going on. I know that's a minority opinion, and I was quite surprised that there's amongst the population that's pretty much the normal thought. But let me put it to you this way: there are some alternative thoughts out there. Another site that you look at possibly is Ice Age Now. They talk about the volcanic eruptions that are occurring under the ocean floors. Now, yeah, that could bring up the temperatures of the oceans too. Volcanic eruptions. Ice Age Now. I'm not going to go over all this, but they talk about and they document huge underwater volcano found off Indonesia. Underwater volcano erupts 90 miles north of Saipan, and blah blah blah. It's not that you can actually prove it one way or the other, but I just want to point out something else, that there is a global agenda for global taxation for global priorities. So, looking at the website here, Global Policy Forum, you'll see that they mention one they call the carbon tax. And the carbon tax is going to be based upon how much natural gas you use, or how much, well, whatever, carbon-based fuels or whatever it is you use up for air travel, production, manufacturing, or whatever. Basically, global warming, it goes on, caused by human activity, brings a potentially far-reaching climatic and ecological disruption if not halted. And it goes on that you need to have this tax globally, so there's a big United Nations incentive to bring this about. And if there's a global tax, there's a global power, and then you figure, what's going on with that? How does who runs that global power? What voice do you have in it? And so forth. That's really my beef with this whole deal. But anyway, um, I just want to point some of these things out, because I don't think people quite see all the angles to the global warming agenda. Maybe there isn't. I say there is an agenda, but the other side of it is there's a little bit more to it, though. And this actually comes from the Council on Foreign Relations website. If there's global warming, what's actually going to happen is the Arctic Ocean is going to become a very strategic area because of all the natural resources that are there. you're talking not just natural gas and oil, but also the fish, whatever. So that you can use for consumption, food consumption. And Russia actually has a hell of a large slice of that area when you're looking at it from the top of the globe. It was considered a wasteland, but it may be becoming more of the new wild, wild west if it becomes to the point where the ice caps are melting. And if you look at oil exploration has been going on hot and heavy in the Arctic area for quite, in the last so many decades. It's become the number one area that's going to be producing the most oil probably in the world. Now, we know about Alaska and Purdue Bay, but also Russia, too. Now, Russia's also opened up and reopening up a lot of its naval bases that were closed during the when the Soviet Union fell apart. Vladimir Putin has actually put this as a top priority. Now, the thing is, this is all based upon assuming that the polar ice caps are melting. They may be, it may not be due to man-made gases, but it may be due to volcanic activity. But then again, there's a lot of other things going on that are could possibly be changing the outlook for that too. The other thing is, if there's a melting of the Arctic ice caps, the sea routes will be changed too. You might see, instead of going through the northern sea route, you might have a possible central Arctic sea route too, which will be a little bit faster. That's a possibility, but the thing is, if you're looking at what happened from 2012 to 2013, the summer ice cap, this was the low point, and it came back with a vengeance. So, I mean, the Arctic ice sheet grew by 533,000 square miles in a year. So, I personally think that a lot of this is probably due to volcanic activity versus man-made CO2 emissions. Not that I do not disagree with keeping the environment clean, but there is a global agenda for a global carbon tax, and which will go along with a global political power. The other side of it, though, if you're looking at some of the arguments about climate change and disruption of climate, the other side of it is this, that there's a breakdown in the Earth's magnetic sphere as the magnetic north has been moving. There's been a weakening of the magnetic north, and that has also affected the climate too, and is also attributed to climate change and disruption of climate, of the winds and all this type of stuff. So there's a little bit more going on than just CO2 gases from man-made activities. So just want to put this out here because there is an agenda where they're talking about whereby what can all peoples jump aboard as a common thing to fight combating global warming. It's something that would traverse, all different nations. It would, in other words, this would be one common goal that everybody should have throughout the world. And it was planned this way because this could be something that could be set forth as a global carbon tax for a global government body. I just want to put that out here because that's really why you're seeing a lot of funding that is going into the global warming. Even though probably what the reality is, we have natural cycles that's going on throughout, climate change has been going on forever. Climate change, where we have a warming period and a cooling period, has been going on forever. We have a warming period and we have a cooling period, and vice versa. It's been going on forever. If you read ancient history, it's been that way. Climate has actually been quite a bit different in Europe 2,000 years ago. It was quite a bit cooler in the Roman times. You can read about some of the battles that were fought in northern Italy when the snow was waist deep. And you're saying waist deep. When does that happen? It doesn't happen too often in northern Italy except in certain, extreme mountainous areas. But no, they're talking in other areas where there's not that much snow today. So the climate does change, but it is a natural cycle too. So, and the other thing that's going on probably with the ocean warming of the oceans, it may actually be the volcano activity. So you're talking about, they found like millions of underwater volcanoes. This is from the Ice Age Now site. It's the minority opinion, but even though it's the minority opinion, one's going to be right and one's going to be wrong. It's not going to be a matter of who's more numerous. It's going to be one's going to be right and one's going to be wrong. So underwater volcanoes do make a difference as far as what happens in the temperature of the water. So that's quite obvious. But, they've been measuring a lot more volcanoes, and that's actually what's been causing a melting of the polar areas, not the man-made CO2 gases. But there's an agenda to tax you through a global carbon tax to bring about more power into global government through the United Nations to bring about change in that way, which may not be a good change, because what is your voice in that? What government going to be? Is it going to be limited government? Are there going to be constitutionally guaranteed rights of the individual? I don't know. Probably not. So, yeah, I just want to bring this out because the thing is, I kind of see something else. I've seen something else with this for quite some time, and there's a lot of people I was surprised that a lot of people do not have seen this angle on things, but some people dismiss it as a conspiracy theory. But if it is a conspiracy theory, it's right there in your face. Global taxes for global priorities, and one of the main things is the carbon tax, and the main reason you'll have a carbon tax is to combat global warming. So, therefore, there's a lot of funding going into why there's global warming. So we can have a carbon tax. If we have a carbon tax, it'll be global carbon tax, and then we have a global authority. Not much of a conspiracy theory because it's right there in your face. It's really a fact. So, anyway, I think that's about all I want to put out on this because I just want to keep it short, simple, and sweet. And there's other implications, though. If the oceans do melt, the oceans melt. If the ice caps in the oceans and the Arctic do melt, it's going to be of strategic importance, particularly to Russia. It doesn't look like it's going to happen, but from what happened from 2012 to 2013. It looks like the ice cap in the Arctic increased quite a bit. They're expecting it. This was like the low point, then it just came back with a vengeance. But if it does not increase, and it seems if it does melt, even if it's from volcanic activity or whatever, it's going to have a lot of implications for sea routes. They're going to change. But the other thing is going to be for oil and natural gas exploration. And this is going to be a hotly contended area by militaries throughout the world, especially Russia. If you're looking at it from this angle, probably this is a better way of looking at it. You can see out of how many countries, what country really has the biggest stake in the Arctic? It's Russia. Here's the U.S., here's Canada, here's Denmark. A lot of people don't realize how much powerful Denmark is because of Greenland, Norway, and then Russia. And Vladimir Putin has stated that he wants to build up these bases in the Arctic, but he's having a little bit of hard time with his military budget because of the price of oil being suppressed right now, and he's not being able to do all the ventures he wants to do. So, but that may change. Demand for oil is pretty great. Now, I also am a proponent of big time into clean air. I think that pretty much every vehicle out there could probably run on higher end technology than using oil and even natural gas or even compressed natural gas. Tesla Motor Corporation is probably going to revolutionize even the way households are run, whereby at some point, even a lot of households might be more off the grid, more or less. When you're looking at states like Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and Southern California, because Tesla's battery technology is going to revolutionize the way things are done actually throughout the world, not just in the area of transportation. And it's going to take us away from, the natural gas and fossil fuels and oils and whatever, if there are fossil fuels, whatever they come from fossil fuels or whatever. I know there's a lot of debate even upon that, but if the polar ice caps are melting, it's going to become a hotly contested area by the world's militaries. So, just want to put out a couple little things for food for thought, because it's not quite as a slam dunk as you think with the global warming being due to man-made CO2 emissions. There is an agenda. There is an agenda for a global tax. And the reason you'll have a global carbon tax is to combat global warming. Therefore, global warming gets a lot of funding. So anyway, just want to put that out there, food for thought. Not that I can absolutely prove it one way or the other, but just want you to get the wheels turning, because I realize some people are totally convinced that global warming exists due to CO2 emissions from mankind. It may not be from that. It may be just a natural cycle. The polar ice caps may be melting due to volcanic activity increasing. Maybe. I don't know. But there is an agenda, and it says right out here in your face. A global carbon tax to combat global warming. So, global taxes for global priorities. Going to be more clear.